Hi there, good evening. I just wanted to touch base with you and talk to you about three things. There are three things that traditional magazine publishers, the big publications out there, really don't want you to know about magazines. So, these are stuff that the insiders know, but not a lot of people do actually know that aren't in the magazine publishing world. And there are three things. So I've written a list up so I can keep on track. So the first thing is, editors or editors of magazines aren't necessarily experts in what they're editing. So what do I mean by that? So back in my day when I was working for a magazine publisher, one of my editors for one of my magazines that happened to be in the home and kitchen space had absolutely no idea really about kitchens. So she happened to be a great writer and was pretty good at what she did. In fact, she actually still lived at home. So she didn't even really, I don't think she used her kitchen much. I think she was leaving that to her mum. But what she was really good at was pulling great content together. So one of the myths that I hear people say to me when we talk about a magazine is that, oh my gosh, I could not be an editor. One, I can't write. And two, I'm just not an expert enough in my field to be considered an editor. And I just want to dispel that myth that just because you're the editor-in-chief of a magazine doesn't mean you have to be a complete nutter boffin and know all about the topic. And you certainly don't need to be a fantastic writer in order to be an editor of a magazine. So, I've got lots of examples for you of friends of mine that have come up through the ranks. There's some quite famous people that became editors of magazines that actually started out on the reception desk. So, you do not need to be an expert in the field. Great if you've got some knowledge on it, but you do not need to be an expert, and you do not necessarily need to be a fantastic writer in order to edit your magazine. However, being an editor of a magazine does position you as a leader in your field. Anyway, I'll move on to the next one. The next one is editorial is king. So magazine publishers don't necessarily want you to really push for editorial in magazines. So what I mean by that is editorial is the stuff written by journalists and put into the magazine, like a product review or a story on you, and advertorial or advertising is obviously what it sounds like, which is ads in a magazine. I know for, years I've worked, doing PR, and, obviously we all know the power of PR in a magazine as opposed to sticking a standard ad in. And the power of that is that, it's almost like third-party endorsement of your product, or third-party endorsement of you as an expert. So, when we're all pushing in these magazines to get editorial, they don't want you to do that. I've just made a call for a client earlier today about looking into some newspaper advertising, and for different reasons, and not necessarily what I think is the right way to go, but could we get some editorial? I can't guarantee that. The editors, it's their discretion. The reason it is so powerful, and they don't want you to know about this, is because they don't want you to push for it. So, having your own magazine, for example, means you hold the power and that you're able to be the editor of your magazine, and you can do editorials on you or your product or things that you're doing, and you get to have that beautiful piece of editorial that then you can use in a whole bunch of different places, like as seen in, as heard about, as read about in XYZ magazine. So they don't want you to push for it, but editorial really is, truly powerful when it comes to publishing and having your product or service or you in print. It certainly trumps any advertising that you can do 99% of the time. And the last one is that, one of the other myths that publishers don't want you to know is, I'll say what it is first before I dispel it. So it's that you have to pay in order to get celebrities to be part of a magazine or to interview for magazines. To get exclusives, and, back in my day in magazine publishing, we paid some decent money to get some real exclusives on topics. But if you're in a magazine where, having that leading exclusive gossip isn't, if it's not important to you, then you certainly don't need to pay to have celebrities in your magazine. Today alone, we've had, I wrote a list there, we've had a major famous personal trainer who's been on some major TV shows, has agreed to be not only in our magazine but on the cover of a magazine, and that's just because she wants obviously to be a part of what we're doing, and we're not paying her to do that. We've had a head coach of a leading Australian basketball team agree to be in our magazine. Again, we're not paying him to be a part of that, and we're getting a full story with photos and all sorts of things. And we've just had yesterday, we had someone agree, the Sharks from Shark Tank Australia agree to be featured in one of our magazines, and we haven't paid a cent. So, yes, some magazine publishers out there will tell you that, in order to get these celebrities, it costs a fortune. There's also really clever ways that you can include major celebrities and in your magazine, and you might not even ever speak to them. And that's another trick that I want you to know, and they're called celebrity write-arounds. But I won't go into that now because it's alive and I'm trying to keep them shorter because I do have a tendency to drag on. So 3 myths that publishers don't want you to know. 1, that editors aren't necessarily experts. So, sometimes an editor can be someone that's just, off the streets, like up from reception, and they've filled that place and they're pulling everything together and bringing a magazine together for a magazine. So if you're wanting to do your own magazine and you're worried that you're not necessarily an expert in their area, then get rid of that. Forget that. If you're really good at pulling ideas together and pulling people together to contribute to a magazine, then you've got the skills it takes to be an editor. That editorial is king. So remember that if you're doing a magazine, the power of having editorial content written about you, your product or service is so much greater than you placing your own ad, because of course you read an ad and you're like, well, of course you're going to tell me that your steak knives are better than everybody else's. But if you read an editorial about these fantastic Australian innovated steak knives in a magazine, then you're going to go, I believe that. Whereas an ad, well, of course they're going to tell me that. So you're going to have some people thinking, you're just saying that because you're putting an ad in. And the last one is that you don't actually have to pay to attract really big names into your magazine. So, as long as you're looking at the benefit to them and the power and what you can offer them, then you can get celebrities to agree to be in your magazines, and you don't have to pay them a cent. And as I said just before, we've actually had someone agree to be on a front cover who's a celebrity in Australia, and we haven't had to pay them. So, remember that the power of a magazine is amazing when you know how to use it for your business.